The holographic map in the center of the Chthonian command bunker bled red. Each crimson icon represented a fallen platoon, a lost bastion, a severed line of communication. They blinked out one by one, swallowed by an encroaching tide of hostile markers that advanced with mathematical certainty. The air, recycled and sterile, tasted of failure. Supreme Commander Boris stood motionless before the display, his towering insectoid form a statue of burnished bronze. The chiton of his honor guard creaked with tension. For 3 generations, the Cathar had been the bulwark of this sector, their doctrines of war as rigid and unyielding as their carapaces. Now, those doctrines were breaking them. The Vorlag swarm, a tide of savage, tactically brilliant marauders, did not fight with honor. They flowed like a pestilence, overwhelming shields, flanking phalanxes, and shattering the morale of a species that had never before countenanced defeat. "Status report," Boris chittered, his voice a low grinding of mandibles, translated into harsh galactic standard by the emitter on his throat. "Sub-Commander Thrax reports the Western Array has fallen," an adjutant replied, his own voice tight with contained panic. "The Vorlag have breached the Anvil Highlands. We have lost contact with the 7th and 9th Battalions. At current rates of attrition, planetary defenses will collapse in less than 3 rotations." Each word was a hammer blow against the Cathar's collective pride. Boris's multiple compound eyes whirred, focusing on a single final option on his private datapad. An option so distasteful, so contrary to the Thar way, that he had dismissed it weeks ago as madness. Now it was the only variable left in a losing equation. He keyed the authorization, his clawed finger hesitating for only a second over the encrypted channel. It was a signal of ultimate desperation, a confession of failure broadcast to the galactic fringe. Less than 1 rotation later, a ship that did not register on any Cathar naval logs sliced through Kython's upper atmosphere. It was a compact, ugly vessel, its hull scarred and patched, devoid of any identifying marks. It landed on the designated platform with a jarring lack of ceremony, its ramp lowering before the engines had fully silenced. 2 figures emerged, Deathworlders, humans. The male walked first. He was not large by galactic standards, his frame lean within a plain, gray shipsuit covered by worn functional tactical gear. His hair was short, a mix of black and silver, and his face was a mask of calm neutrality. His eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, moved with an unnerving economy, absorbing every detail of the Cathar honor guard, the defensive turrets tracking his ship, the strain in the bunker's energy field. He moved with a balanced, fluid grace, a predator at rest. The female followed a pace behind him. She was taller than the male, with an athlete's build beneath a form-fitting suit that had faint, luminous lines of circuitry along the forearms. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, tight bun, and her expression was one of intense, absolute focus. She did not look at the guards or the guns. She seemed to be analyzing the very air, her gaze fixed on something no one else could see. Boris met them at the bunker entrance, dwarfing them both. "You are the Harbingers." The male human gave a slight nod. "I am Elias Vance. This is Anya Sharma. You have a Vorlag problem." It was not a question. "A problem that has cost me 30,000 of my finest warriors," Boris ground out. "Your fee was transmitted. It is considerable." "The fee is for consultation," Vance said, his voice quiet, forcing the towering alien to lean down slightly to hear him. "Results cost more. You want us to make the Vorlag go away. We can do that. But you will not like our methods. Your soldiers will not like them. Your doctrines will be offended. If you can accept that, we have a deal. If not, we can be on our way before they scratch the paint on our ride." Anya's fingers tapped a silent, complex rhythm against her thigh. She still had not spoken. Boris felt a surge of warriors' indignation at the Deathworlders' audacity. Yet the red tide on his tactical map was undeniable. Pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. "Your methods are your own," the Supreme Commander conceded, the words tasting like ash, "as long as they produce victory." Vance's mouth formed the barest hint of a smile. It did not reach his eyes. "Supreme Commander," he said softly, "we don't sell victory. We sell survival. There's a difference." The Harbinger's command post was not a fortified bunker or a grand hall of strategy. It was a cramped, repurposed cargo bay aboard their ship, the Straylight. The air hummed with the thrum of the vessel's oversized power core and was thick with the scent of hot metal and recycled oxygen. Instead of a single monolithic map, a dozen smaller screens flickered with fragmented data: weather patterns, Vorlag communication intercepts, geological surveys, Cathar troop dispositions. Anya stood at the center of this chaotic web of information, her focus absolute. Vance watched from a corner, nursing a cup of black, bitter-smelling coffee. "The Vorlag supply chain is overextended," Anya stated, her voice crisp and clear. She pointed a slender finger at a topographical map. "They're funneling all munitions and fuel through this single canyon pass to support their push on the Anvil Highlands. They rely on speed and shock, not logistics. That's their weakness." On the main screen in the Cathar bunker, Commander Boris watched the same data, his tactical officers arrayed behind him. "A perfect choke point," he chittered, a flicker of approval in his tone. "Your heavy assault teams will meet my 10th Legion at the canyon mouth. We will crush their column in a glorious pincer movement." "No," Vance's voice replied from the comm unit, flat and final. The air in the Cathar bunker grew tense. "No," Boris demanded, "it is the perfect application of overwhelming force." "It's what they'd expect," came the human's reply. "We aren't going to attack the column. We're going to make it disappear." Anya's fingers danced across her console. "Harbinger teams 2 and 3 are in position," she reported. "Team 1 is standing by." Miles away, in the desolate, wind-swept plains to the east of the canyon, 2 humans in light recon armor hunkered down behind a rock outcropping. One of them set a tripod on the ground, mounting a device that looked like a simple speaker. He switched it on. A low, rumbling thud echoed across the landscape, a perfect audio replication of a Cathar siege tank's engine. A moment later, another speaker miles away joined in, then another, until the air itself seemed to vibrate with the sound of an approaching armored division. Inside the canyon, the Vorlag commander, a hulking brute with leathery gray skin, snarled at the reports. His sensors confirmed the audio signatures. A massive Cathar force was flanking him. He bellowed orders, diverting half of his combat patrols from the supply column to meet the phantom threat. "Their patrols are moving east," Anya said, her eyes tracing the paths on her screen. "The canyon's western wall is now minimally guarded. Team 2, you are clear." On the sheer rock face of the canyon's western side, 3 more Harbingers, anchored by whisper-quiet gravisenders, planted charges along the base of the cliff. They were not explosives. They were magnetic pulse disruptors, calibrated to a specific frequency. "Phase 1 complete," Vance announced calmly into the comm, his eyes on Anya. Boris and his officers watched their tactical display in utter confusion. The human mercenaries were doing nothing. A few audio decoys, a small team climbing a cliff. It was nonsensical. It was dishonorable. "This is your strategy?" the Supreme Commander spat. "Tricks and noise?" "Watch," was Vance's only reply. As the first truck in the Vorlag supply column entered the target zone, Anya's voice was like ice. "Team 2, fire!" The disruptors activated. They sent no shockwave, created no explosion. Instead, a wave of intense, focused magnetic energy pulsed through the rock. It didn't target the Vorlag soldiers or their vehicles directly. It targeted the iron-rich bedrock of the canyon floor. For a span of 3 seconds, the natural magnetic field of the planet in that specific area was violently, chaotically inverted. The heavy metallic supply trucks, laden with tons of ammunition and fuel, were ripped from the ground. They were not thrown, they were lifted and then brutally slammed back down as the field fluctuated, twisting axles, rupturing fuel cells, and crushing suspension systems. The entire column of 24 vehicles became a tangled, impassable snarl of wreckage in less than 10 seconds. Then, from a ridge overlooking the chaos, Harbinger Team 1 opened fire, not with plasma cannons, but with simple high-velocity sniper rifles, picking off the stunned Vorlag officers trying to rally their troops. Panic completed the job. The Vorlag column, its supply line severed, and its command structure decapitated, dissolved into a terrified mob. In the Cathar bunker there was absolute silence. They had not witnessed a battle. They had witnessed an assassination performed on an entire logistical operation. It was brutally efficient, bloodless for their side, and utterly, profoundly alien. The Vorlag advance on the Anvil Highlands had not just been halted. It had been starved. The confrontation took place in the stark metallic confines of what Boris used as a forward office. The Supreme Commander stood at his full height, his bronze carapace gleaming under the harsh lights, radiating an aura of contained fury. He faced Vance, who was leaning against a bulkhead, seemingly relaxed yet poised. "I have reviewed the data from your operation," Boris began, the translator turning his chittering into clipped, angry words. "You disabled their supply convoy. You did not destroy it. You sowed chaos among their ranks. You did not annihilate them. This is not war. This is pest control." "My contract says I'm the pest controller," Vance replied evenly, taking a slow sip from his ever-present mug. "You want glorious last stands and noble sacrifices, you can have them. But you'll be making them alone. My job is to keep your soldiers alive, and the best way to do that is to make sure they never have to fight a fair fight. Fairness is the heart of combat. Honor is its soul." Boris slammed a clawed fist onto his metal desk, leaving a deep scratch. "My legions are trained for pitched battle. They are not skirmishers. They are not assassins hiding in the rocks." Anya, standing by the door, spoke for the first time since their arrival, her voice cutting through the tension. "Your legions are trained to die, Commander. Their tactics are predictable, their formations brittle. The Vorlag have analyzed you. They know that if they push a phalanx here, you will reinforce it there. You are a book they have read 100 times. A klaxon blared through the bunker, a shrill, insistent cry. An adjutant burst into the office, his mandibles clicking in distress. "Commander, a massive Vorlag assault on Fort Kresh. The northern wall is compromised. They're pouring into the lower bailey." Boris turned to the tactical display on his wall. A cluster of Cathar icons was being rapidly overwhelmed. "Dispatch the 3rd and 5th relief columns, full speed!" "They won't make it in time," Anya said, her eyes already scanning the data flowing to a portable display she held. "The fort's garrison will be overrun in 40 minutes. Your relief columns will arrive in 60, just in time to be ambushed in the open field." "We must try," Boris roared. "There's another way," Vance said, pushing himself off the wall. He pointed to a schematic of the fort on the screen. Fort Kresh was built over a network of geothermal vents. Your engineers used them to power the fortress shields. "What of it?" Boris snapped. "My team is already inside the vent network," Vance stated, as if discussing the weather. Boris's compound eyes widened in shock. "We can overload the primary pressure regulator. The resulting steam eruption will be catastrophic. It will collapse the northern wall and the entire lower bailey, burying the bulk of the Vorlag assault force under thousands of tons of rock." Boris stared at him, aghast. "But my garrison is in the lower bailey. You would sacrifice them?" "We'd be sacrificing the ground they're standing on," Anya corrected him coolly. "I've analyzed the fort's evacuation protocols. The garrison can retreat to the central keep in 7 minutes. The Vorlag are too focused on their assault to notice. The Cathar soldiers will survive. The Vorlag will be entombed. To destroy our own fortress as a weapon? To intentionally cause a collapse? It is unthinkable," Boris stammered. "It violated every principle of Cathar siegecraft. I forbid it." Vance held the Supreme Commander's gaze. "It's your fort." He turned to leave. "Let us know when you need us to recover the bodies." As Vance and Anya stepped out of the office, Boris watched the tactical map, his resolve warring with the cold, hard facts of impending slaughter. The red icons of the Vorlag were spreading like a virus through the schematic of Fort Kresh. He heard Vance's quiet voice from the corridor, speaking into his comm. "Anya, what's the window?" 4 minutes until the garrison's position is untenable," her reply was immediate. 3 minutes until the Vorlag secure the main gate control." Boris gripped his desk, his chiton creaking. Honor demanded he send his troops to a valiant death. Logic screamed that the humans were right. Through the open doorway, he saw Anya lift her comm device. She did not look at Vance. She did not look at Boris. Her eyes were fixed on her data screen. "Harbinger team, this is Sharma," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Execute." Boris rushed to the doorway, bellowing a command to stop, but it was too late. On the main tactical display, a massive energy surge flared from the heart of Fort Kresh. A moment later, the entire northern quadrant of the fortress icon turned gray, the dozens of red Vorlag markers within it vanishing in an instant. A single green icon representing the Cathar garrison was shown securely positioned in the central keep. The assault was broken. The fort was saved. Vance turned back to face the stunned Supreme Commander. "Next time, Commander," he said softly, "try to keep up." The success at Fort Kresh, while galling to Cathar's sensibilities, had a chilling effect on the Vorlag. Their momentum was broken, their confidence shattered. They had expected a wall of shields and spears. They got landslides and strategic disappearances. They slowed their advance, becoming cautious, almost paranoid. This was the moment Vance had been waiting for. "They're hesitating," Vance observed, tracing a line on the main holographic table aboard the Straylight. "They've pulled their forward command units back to consolidate. They're relying on mobile data hubs to coordinate their next move." Anya brought up a schematic. It was a heavily armored, six-legged vehicle, bristling with communication antennae. "The Vorlag Synapse Unit," she identified it, "a mobile data core and command vehicle. It coordinates drone attacks, troop movements, and relays all battlefield intelligence back to their primary fleet. It's the brain of their ground operation." "And we're going to give it a lobotomy," Vance finished. "A direct assault is," Boris began over the comm link, his voice still stiff with resentment from the incident at the fort. "Suicide, I know," Anya cut him off. "We're not assaulting it. I'm going to walk in, download its core data, and walk out." There was a moment of stunned silence from the Cathar command bunker. Even Vance raised an eyebrow. "Alone?" "It's a data infiltration, Elias, not a brawl," Anya replied, her tone matter-of-fact. "The more people, the more noise. The Synapse unit is protected by electronic countermeasures and drone patrols, not heavy infantry. I can handle it." Her confidence was absolute, a solid wall of certainty. It was a confidence born of something more than skill. That night, under the dim light of Kython's pale green satellite, a lone figure moved through the jagged canyons of the Vorlag-held territory. Anya wore a sleek, black infiltration suit that hugged her form, its surface seeming to drink the faint light. It was a liquid silhouette against the rock. She moved with an unnatural grace, her steps perfectly timed to the howling wind, her path weaving through the overlapping patrol routes of the Vorlag drones as if she knew their flight plans by heart. She did. Back on the Straylight, Vance monitored her vitals and a direct feed from her suit's sensor suite. What he saw was a torrent of data that would have overwhelmed a normal human operator. Anya was processing it all simultaneously. Drone patrol timings, seismic sensor grids, communication handshake protocols. Her neural augmentations, the reason for her almost supernatural analytical ability, were running at peak capacity. Faint blue light seeped from the data ports on her arms, visible even through the suit's fabric. She reached the Synapse unit, which was nestled in a small, well-guarded ravine. She didn't try to force the hatch. Instead, she knelt beside one of its thick support legs and attached a small device. It was a data probe. A stream of code, impossibly complex, flowed from her forearm port through the probe and into the Vorlag vehicle's systems. She was not hacking it, she was having a conversation with it, convincing its security that she was a friendly diagnostic tool. Alarms should have screamed. Drones should have swarmed. But Anya's code was a ghost, a whisper in the machine that rewrote security logs as it passed through them. Inside the vehicle, the Vorlag crew would see nothing more than a routine system check. The data core began to dump its contents into her portable storage unit. Terabytes of information flowed in minutes. Just as the download completed, a Vorlag patrol stumbled into the ravine, ahead of schedule. Vance's voice was tense in her ear. "Anya, you have company." Her reaction was instantaneous. She didn't panic. She didn't run. She detached the probe, and the moment it disconnected, she triggered a localized EMP from her suit's gauntlet. The lights of the Synapse unit flickered. The two approaching Vorlag grunts stopped, looking at their command vehicle in confusion. That brief moment of hesitation was all she needed. She was already gone, melting back into the shadows she had emerged from, leaving behind a baffled patrol and a completely unaware command crew who would later file a report about a minor, inexplicable power surge. Back in the Cathar bunker, the downloaded data flooded their systems. It was a treasure trove: fleet compositions, future attack vectors, munition levels, command hierarchies. It was everything they needed to preemptively dismantle the entire Vorlag invasion. A young Cathar Signals intelligence officer stared at his screen, his mandibles agape. He turned to Supreme Commander Boris. "Sir, the human female. She bypassed their encryption. That is not possible with current technology. And the infiltration path she took, she moved between drone patrol sweeps with a margin of less than 1 second. It's not just skill, it's predictive. It's as if she knew what the machine was going to do before it did." A cold suspicion began to form in Boris's mind. These humans were more than just clever mercenaries. He keyed his private console, initiating a deep-level priority search through the secured galactic archives for the designation Harbinger. The results were sparse. File after file was sealed, redacted, or classified at levels far beyond his authority. All he found were fragments, a footnote in a report on the Cygnus extinction, a heavily censored mention in the fall of the Kelmorian Empire, and a single chilling warning from a Terran authority file: disavowed, extinction-level specialists, do not engage, do not assist. All contact is at own risk. The warning was 20 years old. The initial euphoria in the Cathar Command Center quickly curdled into confusion, then dread. The captured Vorlag data, once decrypted beyond the top-level tactical information, did not paint a picture of a conquering horde. It told a story of a desperate, panicked retreat. A junior analyst, his carapace flushed with a sickly pale color, approached Boris's command throne. He was trembling, a clear breach of Cathar military decorum. "Supreme Commander, you must see this." He projected the findings onto the main holographic display. The screen filled not with battle plans, but with astronomical charts. They showed the path of a vast nebulous cloud moving through interstellar space. Its trajectory was a straight line aimed directly at this sector of the galaxy. Another file opened: scientific logs, frantic, failed experiments. Spectrographic analysis of the cloud showed it was composed of self-replicating, energy-consuming micro-machines. The final file was a series of communications translated from the guttural Vorlag language. They were not orders to attack, but pleas for salvation. They spoke of worlds gone dark, of fleets consumed, of a silent gray tide that ate stars and ships alike. They called it the Scourge. The invasion of Kython was not an act of aggression. It was an act of desperation. "My lord," the analyst stammered, pointing to a geological survey map of Kython that was part of the Vorlag data. "Their logs indicate Kython possesses a unique subterranean crystalline formation. They believed they could use our geothermal energy network to turn the entire planet into a massive frequency resonator, a sort of planetary weapon to destroy the Scourge." The truth landed in the bunker with the force of a physical blow. The Vorlag were not trying to take their planet. They were trying to use it as the last bullet in their gun against an enemy that was hunting them to extinction. Vance and Anya stood beside Boris, watching the display in grim silence. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The Vorlag's reckless, all-or-nothing tactics, their disregard for their own losses. They weren't fighting to win, they were fighting against a clock. As if on cue, a priority alert flashed on the comm station. "Sir," the operator called out, "we're picking up a stray low-power broadcast. It's a Vorlag fleet channel, but it's damaged, unencrypted." "Put it on," Vance commanded, his voice sharp. A crackle of static filled the room, followed by a rasping, terrified voice. "Repeat, Brood Captain Kale, do you read? The Scourge has breached the Oort cloud of the primary star. I say again, it is in system. All outer colonies are dark. It's moving faster than projected. How much longer on Kython? We are out of time." The transmission cut out. Silence. The Cathar officers stared at each other, their rigid honor codes and hatred for the Vorlag vaporizing in the face of a shared, unthinkable doom. They had been fighting the wrong war. All their victories, all their sacrifices had been utterly meaningless. They had been wasting precious time killing refugees. Boris slowly turned his massive head to look at the two humans. His multiple eyes focused on Vance, no longer with anger or suspicion, but with a dawning, terrible understanding. The name of their unit was not a boast. It was a warning, Harbinger, an omen of what is to come. Vance met his gaze, his face carved from stone. "Your contract with us has changed, Supreme Commander," he said. his quiet voice cutting through the despair. "Our fee just went up." He turned away from the stunned Cathar leader and walked towards the command center's primary interstellar comms panel. His movements were deliberate, resolute. Anya was already at his side, her fingers flying across a datapad, preparing protocols. "What are you doing?" Boris demanded, taking a heavy step forward. Vance didn't look back. "My job," he said. He shouldered the Cathar communications officer aside, ignoring the warrior's indignant hiss. With a few swift keystrokes, he bypassed the Cathar security lockouts, accessing the main transmitter array. "I'm calling the manager." He recalibrated the frequency, inputting the command codes he'd pulled from the Synapse unit's data. He was opening a direct, high-priority channel to the Vorlag command ship. Cathar security guards, seeing their most sacred command equipment being handled by an alien mercenary, raised their plasma rifles, the barrels glowing with lethal energy. "Commander," one of them barked at Boris. "Your orders?" Boris stood frozen, the entire context of his reality having shifted in the space of minutes. He looked from his armed guards to the calm, determined human who was about to talk to the monster he'd sworn to destroy. Vance leaned into the microphone. His voice, now broadcast across the battle-scarred planet and into the cold of space, was clear and steady. "Vorlag command vessel," he began. "This is Harbinger. We need to talk." The Cathar command bunker had become a pressure cooker of silent hostility. Plasma rifles remained trained on Vance, their energetic hum a constant threat. The human, however, seemed entirely unconcerned. He stood before the comms panel as if he owned it, waiting for a reply from the void. Boris remained motionless, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting imperatives. To shoot the human was to follow protocol. To let him speak was to admit that every Thar life lost in this war had been a tragic waste. Anya stood a few feet away from Vance, a still point in the storm. She wasn't watching the guards, she was watching her datapad, her expression intense as she monitored the Vorlag fleet's electronic response to their unauthorized hail. "They are attempting to triangulate our position," she said quietly, for Vance's ears only. "Their fire control systems are active." "Let them," Vance murmured back. "They're scared. Scared people are predictable." A voice finally boomed from the speakers. It was a low guttural growl, heavy with menace and exhaustion. "Who is this? Who dares use a Vorlag command channel?" "My name is Elias Vance. I'm a human mercenary," Vance said into the microphone, his tone conversational. "My unit was hired by the Cathar to stop you, and as you've probably noticed, we've been successful." A harsh, grating sound that might have been a Vorlag laugh echoed in the bunker. "A Deathworlder insect, boasting. You have been a nuisance, a causer of delays, nothing more. State your purpose before I sterilize this frequency in the bunker it emanates from." "Our purpose has changed," Vance said. "We have your data core from the Synapse unit you lost in the canyons. All of it. We know about the Scourge." The silence that followed was more powerful than any threat. The background hiss of the open channel seemed to deepen. The Cathar guards shifted, their antennae twitching. Even they could feel the change in the atmosphere. "We know you're not invaders, you're refugees," Vance continued, pressing his advantage. "You're running from something that has already destroyed your worlds, and according to your own fleet's distress calls, it just entered this system." Anya looked up from her datapad. "Their targeting locks have disengaged," she whispered. The voice that returned from the speaker was different. The bluster was gone, replaced by a deep, profound weariness. "What do you want, human?" "I want to offer you a new deal," Vance stated plainly. "Your plan to turn Kython into a weapon is a long shot, based on questionable science and a prayer. You don't have the time to make it work, and you don't have the manpower to hold off the Cathar while you try. But you have a fleet, advanced tactical knowledge of the Scourge, and a vested interest in not being rendered into gray dust. The Cathar have fortified ground positions, intimate knowledge of this planet's unique geology, and a home to defend. I have us." Boris took a thunderous step forward. "You offer a deal on our behalf? You have no authority." Vance held up a hand, silencing the Supreme Commander without looking at him. "What I have," he said, his voice dropping, becoming more personal, directed at the two commanders from warring species, "is a talent for fighting unwinnable wars. Right now, you are two species preparing to be annihilated separately. I am offering you the chance to be annihilated together, or, if you listen to me, the chance to survive." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The fate of two species hung in the balance, brokered by a disavowed human mercenary in a stolen command center. "I am proposing a meeting," Vance declared. "You, me, and Commander Boris. No guards, no armies. Just three commanders on a field of battle that is about to become irrelevant. We will forge an alliance, or we will all die. The location is a neutral plateau in the Ashen Wastes. I'm sending the coordinates now. You have one rotation to decide." He cut the transmission. The silence in the bunker returned, thick and suffocating. Vance turned away from the console to face Boris. The human seemed impossibly small before the towering bronze warrior, yet his presence filled the room. "You have committed treason," Boris grated. "No," Vance corrected him gently. "I have fulfilled my contract. I am ensuring your survival. The fact that your enemy gets to survive too is a bonus. You should be thanking me." He walked past the still-armed guards who looked to their commander for a sign. Boris watched him go, the logic of the human's words a poison seeping into the deep wells of his pride and honor. The Scourge was here. His war was a farce, and the only being in the system with a plan was the Deathworlder he had hired to kill the very people he now had to trust. Boris slowly raised a clawed hand, and the guards lowered their weapons. The decision was made. The plateau in the Ashen Wastes was a desolate stage, perfectly chosen for its grim neutrality. A constant, mournful wind kicked up plumes of fine gray dust from the ground, the remnants of a volcanic event millennia ago. The sky overhead was a bruised purple, and Kython's pale green satellite was a sickly eye staring down at them. Three shuttles sat a respectful distance apart on the cracked earth, their engines silent. Vance and Anya stood at the center of the plateau, the wind tugging at their gear. Vance was a study in stillness, while Anya's gaze continually swept the horizon, her mind processing data from a dozen different passive sensors. The Cathar arrived first. Supreme Commander Boris emerged from his shuttle, flanked by two massive honor guards in ceremonial armor, their plasma glaives held at a ready position. His own carapace seemed to absorb the dim light, making him a figure of grim authority. He stopped 30 feet from the humans, his posture rigid, radiating mistrust. Minutes later, the Vorlag shuttle landed. Its ramp hissed open, revealing Brood Captain Kale. He was even more imposing in person than his comms image suggested. A being of thick muscle and leathery gray hide, he moved with the predatory hunch of a creature born for violence. The two veterans behind him were scarred and grim, their multi-lens eyes scanning the Cathar with pure, undiluted hatred. The two alien commanders stared at each other across the dusty expanse, a chasm of mutual loathing between them. Generations of conflict, thousands of dead on both sides, stood as an invisible wall. "This is folly," Kale's translated voice growled, a low vibration that seemed to shake the very air. "I should have glassed your bunker, human." "You could have," Vance replied easily, taking a step forward into the space between them, a fragile bridge between two pillars of hate. "But you didn't, because you're out of options, just like him." He gestured with his chin towards Boris. "We do not ally with butchers," Boris chittered, his honor guard taking a menacing step forward. The Vorlag veterans mirrored the movement, their hands hovering over the hilts of their sidearms. Vance ignored the posturing. "Good. Then you can both die here, arguing about who was the bigger butcher, while the Scourge eats your ships, your cities, and your children. It doesn't care about your honor, Boris, and it doesn't care about your suffering, Kale. It just consumes." He turned to Anya. "Show them." Anya stepped forward, her calm focus a stark contrast to the simmering violence of the aliens. She raised her hand, and a small device on her wrist projected a three-dimensional holographic display into the air between the two factions. The image that coalesced was of the Scourge, not as a vague cloud, but as a terrifyingly detailed simulation. "This data is compiled from your own synapse unit, Captain Kale," Anya began, her voice steady and clear. Faint blue light glowed from the data ports on her forearms as she manipulated the hologram. "The Scourge is not a fleet, it is a swarm. Trillions of self-replicating nanites. Each one is a microfactory, capable of consuming any matter, organic or inorganic, and converting it into a copy of itself. Its expansion is exponential. The hologram zoomed in, showing a simulation of a Vorlag cruiser being overwhelmed. The ship didn't explode. It was simply erased, dissolving into a gray mist that then joined the larger swarm. They do not have a command structure to decapitate, Anya continued, her voice clinical. They do not have supply lines to cut. They are the battle, the weapon, and the army all in one. Conventional weapons are almost useless. For every billion you destroy, 2 billion more are created from the wreckage of your own ships. She then turned the projection to Boris. Your planetary shields, Commander, will hold them off for approximately 37 hours. Then the nanites will have analyzed the shield frequency and adapted, phasing through it as if it weren't there. After that, the planetary biosphere will be consumed in just under 6 hours. Her presentation was cold, brutal, and backed by the Vorlag's own stolen data. The raw, irrefutable facts did what posturing and threats could not. They silenced the hatred. The honor guards and veterans looked from the terrifying hologram to their commanders, the reality of their situation dawning on them. Your plan, Boris said, his voice now devoid of its earlier arrogance, to turn our world into a weapon, would it have worked? Kale let out a low growl of frustration. Our scientists believed the crystalline formation could amplify a disruptive frequency, but the calculations were theoretical. We did not have time for a proper survey. You would have failed, Anya stated simply. The formation is unstable. Activating it with the brute force you intended would have shattered the continent and triggered a premature feedback loop with a 92% chance of having no effect on the Scourge at all. It was Anya's augments, her ability to process geological and theoretical physics data at impossible speeds, that allowed her to make this definitive statement. She was the verifier, the ultimate unbiased fact-checker. The two alien commanders finally looked at Vance, their ancient enmity momentarily forgotten, replaced by a shared, desperate hope. You said you have a plan, human, Kale rumbled. I do, Vance confirmed. It's ugly, it's costly, and it requires the two of you to trust each other. It requires Vorlag pilots to fly cover for Cathar engineers. It requires Cathar discipline to hold a line so Vorlag mobility can exploit an opening. It requires you to stop being Vorlag and Cathar and to start being an army. He looked from the hulking gray predator to the rigid bronze warrior. The Scourge is the enemy. Everything else is just a distraction. So, are we going to stand here and posture until we're all cosmic dust, or are we going to get to work? For a long moment, the only sound was the howling wind. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, Supreme Commander Boris retracted the claws on his right hand, a Cathar gesture of de-escalation. Across the dusty ground, Brood Captain Kale gave a slow, curt nod. The most unlikely alliance in galactic history was born. The transformation of the Cathar homeworld was jarring and chaotic. On the sprawling training grounds outside the main citadel, sites that would have been cause for war a week ago were now commonplace. Hulking Vorlag skirmishers, their gray hides slick with sweat, practiced advancing under the cover of Cathar shield-bearers, the crackle of their plasma rifles mingling with the hum of Cathar energy fields. In the skies above, sleek Vorlag interceptors flew in tight formation with bulky Cathar gunships, their pilots learning to sync targeting data and coordinate attack runs. It was a symphony of barely controlled chaos, and Vance and Anya were the conductors. Vance stood with Boris and Kale over a massive holographic map of the planet, now a shared asset between the two armies. The human commander moved icons around with swift, decisive motions, outlining his audacious plan. The Scourge moves as a singular entity, Vance explained, drawing a line from the planet's northern pole down towards the equator. It follows the path of least resistance and highest energy. We are going to give it one. Captain Kale, your fleet's job is gravimetric shepherding. You'll use your ship's gravity projectors to create a low-energy channel in the atmosphere, funneling the swarm towards this location. He tapped a spot on the map, a massive, deep canyon system known to the Cathar as the Fire Trench. Kale's 4 black eyes blinked slowly. You want us to hurt a force of nature? Our projectors are not designed for such a delicate task on this scale. Anya's running the calculations, Vance said dismissively. She'll tell your pilots exactly where to be and when. Just follow the numbers." He then turned to Boris. "Commander, your forces have the harder job. While the Vorlag are hurting the Scourge, your engineers need to rig the entire fire trench with every seismic charge in your arsenal. We're not trying to blow the Scourge up, we're going to bury it. We need to trigger a seismic event that will collapse both sides of the canyon, burying it under 1 billion tons of rock and magma." Boris stared at the plan, his mandibles working silently. The scale of it was staggering. The fire trench is geologically unstable. The energy required, it would shatter the continent. The environmental backlash would render the entire northern hemisphere uninhabitable for centuries. "Centuries of habitability are better than 0, Vance countered bluntly. "This is the price." While the commanders dealt with the grand strategy, Anya was on the ground with the soldiers. She was a whirlwind of focused energy, moving from squadron to squadron, her voice sharp and precise as she broke down centuries of military dogma. "No," she snapped at a mixed group of Vorlag and Cathar infantry. A Vorlag trooper had just tried to charge ahead, while his Cathar partner had instinctively formed a defensive shield wall, leaving them both exposed. "You are not 2 units. You are 1. Cathar, your shield is not just for you. It is a mobile wall for him to fire over. Vorlag, your advance is not a solo charge. It is a probe that draws fire so the shield wall knows where to reinforce. Think symbiotically." She demonstrated the maneuver herself, her movements fluid and economical, showing how the Cathar shield could provide cover for the Vorlag's aggressive push. The soldiers, bred for generations to kill one another, watched with a mixture of awe and confusion. But they learned. The instinct to kill their new allies was slowly, painstakingly, being replaced by a fragile instinct to survive alongside them. Small moments of grudging respect began to bloom in the crucible of forced cooperation. A Cathar medic, treating a wounded Vorlag, discovered their biologies were surprisingly compatible. A Vorlag technician, impressed by the robust simplicity of a Cathar power generator, offered a suggestion that doubled its efficiency. They were still enemies, but now they were enemies with a common purpose, their hatred temporarily shelved in the face of annihilation. The Harbingers' own small team of 12 mercenaries moved among the two armies like ghosts, experts in cross-species integration. They taught Cathar snipers how to use Vorlag targeting software and showed Vorlag pilots how to refuel from Cathar energy conduits. They were the glue holding the impossible alliance together. In the command center, as the final preparations were being made, Kale watched the humans work. "Your people," he rumbled, speaking to Vance. "They are not soldiers. They are something else." "We're professional problem solvers," Vance replied, not looking up from the map. "Today's problem is extinction." "And tomorrow's?" Boris asked, a new unfamiliar curiosity in his voice. Vance finally looked up, his pale blue eyes meeting those of the 2 alien commanders. "Tomorrow," he said, "we send you the bill." The end arrived without a sound. There was no thunderous explosion in orbit, no screaming descent through the atmosphere. There was only a profound and terrifying silence. One by one, the orbital defense platforms in the northern hemisphere went dark. Their signals simply ceased to exist. On the main view screen in the Joint Command Center, the live feed from a satellite over the pole flickered, distorted, and then dissolved into a screen of static gray. The Scourge had made landfall. Collective gasp went through the room. Cathar and Vorlag officers standing side by side stared at the dead screen. The enemy was no longer a theoretical threat on a holographic map. It was here. It was real. Vance stood before the screen, his arms crossed. His face was a placid mask, but his eyes were hard, focused. "Anya, give me a visual." Rerouting through the Southern Hemisphere geosynchronous network, her voice came over the comm, crisp and immediate. "Compensating for atmospheric distortion, now." The main screen flickered back to life, showing a view of Kython from a severe angle. The planet's northern polar cap was gone. In its place, stretching down across the continent, was a shimmering, shifting mass of iridescent gray. It wasn't a cloud resting on the surface, it was the surface itself, being unmade. It absorbed the light, reflecting nothing back, a hole in the world that was actively growing, spreading south like a cancerous stain. It was a slow, silent, inexorable consumption of reality. It's following the energy grid, Kale growled, his four eyes wide, just as the human predicted. All forces to final positions, Boris commanded, his voice tight but steady. The discipline of his species, their greatest strength, was now holding them together. All non-essential personnel to the southern shelters. This is not a drill. Across the planet, the last desperate preparations were completed. Vorlag ships took up their positions in the upper atmosphere, their engines glowing as they began to project the massive gravimetric fields that would act as invisible walls, guiding the Scourge's advance. On the ground, Cathar engineering teams made the final connections on the seismic charges deep within the fire trench. In the command center, Boris turned to Vance. The Cathar commander had been researching the name Harbinger in his people's oldest legends. He had found it, not as a mercenary unit, but as a concept. A word from a dead language that meant the ones who stand at the end. It was a myth. A boogeyman used to scare young Cathar into obedience, a story of shadowy figures who appeared only when a world was about to die. "Your unit's name," Boris said, his translated voice low. "It is not a coincidence." "No," Vance replied quietly, "it's a resume." Anya's voice cut in, pulling them back to the present. "Elias, the swarm is accelerating. Its mass is increasing exponentially as it consumes the polar ice caps and the tundra. It will reach the fire trench 17 minutes ahead of schedule." Vance nodded. "The plan holds. The timing just got tighter." He looked at the two alien commanders, the leaders of species that had been trying to exterminate each other just days ago. "This is it. Everything comes down to the next few hours. Your people have to hold the line. They have to trust the plan. They have to trust each other." He walked over to the tactical station where Anya was working, her fingers a blur across the controls. The amount of data she was processing was astronomical. The fleet's positioning, the swarm's density and speed, the readiness of the seismic charges. "The legends about your name," Kale rumbled, having overheard Boris, "they are true, then? You specialize in fighting apocalypses." Vance paused, his back to them. "We specialize in scenarios where the conventional response is to give up and die. We exist because the great powers in the galaxy refuse to admit that things like the Scourge are real. It's bad for commerce, bad for morale. So they look the other way, and they disavow anyone who says otherwise." He finally turned around, his expression grim. "We are the dirty secret of a complacent galaxy. We are the ones they call when they have no one left to call. And we are very, very expensive." On the screen, the gray tide washed over mountain ranges, erasing them from existence. The silent, unstoppable wave of oblivion was coming for them all. "All ships," Kale bellowed into his comm, his voice a warrior's roar, "begin the funnel for the memory of Vorlag." "All ground troops," Boris echoed, his voice resonating with grim purpose, "hold the line for the soul of Kython." The final desperate battle for a world had begun. The view on the main screen was apocalyptic. The Scourge, now a monstrous river of gray nothingness 50 miles wide, flowed inexorably down the atmospheric channel carved by the Vorlag fleet. The ships, straining at the very edge of their operational limits, bucked and shuddered as they contained the swarm, their hulls glowing cherry red from the stress. "Gravimetric integrity at 89%, a Vorlag officer yelled, his voice frayed with tension. "We can't hold it for much longer." The Scourge poured into the mouth of the fire trench, a silent, swirling vortex of planetary death. The canyon, a geological marvel that had stood for eons, was being filled with the dust of its own unmaking. "It's in the trench," Anya announced, her voice a tense whisper of focus. "The entire swarm is concentrated. Seismic charges are armed and ready." "All ships break formation and retreat to minimum safe distance," Kale ordered. "Now!" The Vorlag fleet disengaged, their ships rocketing away from the planet as the gravimetric funnel collapsed. The Scourge, now contained only by the rock walls of the canyon, churned violently. "The charges must be detonated manually from the central command node," Boris stated, his gaze fixed on the screen. "The risk of electronic warfare from the swarm is too great to risk a remote signal." He turned to his chief engineer. "Is the team in place?" The engineer nodded grimly. "They are, Supreme Commander. They know the risks." But on Anya's tactical display, a new icon was flashing red. "Problem," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "The swarm's density is creating an unforeseen gravimetric shear. It's destabilizing the command node. The remote detonator housing is compromised. It can't be activated from the primary bunker." A collective wave of despair washed over the command center. They had gotten so close, only to be foiled by an unpredictable variable. "There must be a way," Kale roared in frustration. "There is," Anya said softly. "The node has a manual override, a physical trigger. Someone has to be at the node itself to fire the charges." A suicide mission, a one-way trip into the heart of the storm. Before Boris could give an order that would send his own warriors to a certain death, Kale spoke into his private comm. "Squad Gamma, your objective has changed. Proceed to the central node. This is a volunteer mission for the future of the brood." But Boris was already speaking as well. "My engineers are the only ones who can arm the sequence correctly. Engineering Team Delta, you will accompany the Vorlag squad." Vance watched the two commanders, a flicker of something that might have been respect in his eyes. They had sent a joint suicide squad, Cathar and Vorlag, going to their deaths together. It was the ultimate proof that they had finally become one army. The tactical display showed the two squads, a mix of bronze and gray icons, moving towards the detonation point deep within the earth. They sent back one final message, not of fear but of grim resolve. "For Kython, for the Vorlag, it has been an honor." Anya, Vance said quietly. "I'm on it," she replied, her fingers flying. She rerouted all auxiliary power from the planetary grid, shunting it directly to the seismic charges, giving them an extra 10% amplification. It was all she could do. Then there was only waiting. The seconds stretched into eternity. The command center was utterly silent, save for the hum of the electronics. Then it happened. The planet shuddered. It was not a tremor. It was a deep, bone-jarring convulsion, as if the world itself was crying out in pain. On the view screen, the entire continent of the fire trench seemed to lift upwards. The canyon walls, miles high, crumbled inwards with agonizing slowness. An eruption of molten magma, blindingly bright, burst forth from the depths, not as a plume, but as a tidal wave of liquid fire that flooded the trench, instantly vaporizing and then burying the Scourge under a new mountain range of cooling rock. The seismic shockwave raced across the globe, but the southern continent held. The plan, the impossible, insane, human plan, had worked. Where the fire trench had been, there was now a jagged, steaming scar of black glass and newly formed mountains. The sky above it, once a swirling vortex of gray, was clear. The Scourge was gone, contained, entombed. A ragged cheer, a sound of disbelief and profound relief, erupted in the command center. Vorlag and Cathar embraced, their animosity washed away in a shared victory. Vance and Anya were already walking towards the exit. They moved silently through the celebration, unnoticed. Boris saw them leaving and hurried to intercept them at the docking bay where the Strelite waited. Kale was right behind him. "You are leaving?" Boris asked, his voice filled with a strange mix of gratitude and awe. "Job's done," Vance said, turning at the top of the ramp. "The price of our services, plus a hazard bonus for the planetary remodeling, has been transferred to your account. We'll collect it from there." "You saved 2 species from extinction," Kale rumbled. "You forged peace between eternal enemies. How can we repay you?" Vance looked at the scarred planet, at the 2 commanders standing together, and then back at his ship. "You already have," he said. "You listened. That's rarer than you think." Anya gave a single curt nod, then disappeared into the ship. Vance followed her, and the ramp hissed shut. The Strelite, the ugly ship that had brought the galaxy's most unlikely saviors, lifted off the platform and vanished into the bruised sky, leaving behind a shattered world, 2 indebted species, and a legend. The legend of the only Deathworlders who were welcome in every war zone, especially the ones you couldn't win.